you for ages, but lovely to see you.
Hi, Pat.
Welcome, folks. Thank you, Fiona. So the session's being recorded. We're only together for a short period of time, and Pat and I'm Jacqui Sjenitzer, and my colleague Pat Bullen and I, who some of you will have spent some time with Pat already today, and you probably already know Pat well as well. And we have Fiona here as well with us supporting the session. The purpose of the session is to dive into self-compassion. So at the end of the session, we would like to have defined self-compassion, to have given you the opportunity to think about where are the places in your work and leadership that require compassion right now, and to give you some pointers for further research if you want to go and do some more reading. So it's going to be short and sweet, but don't underestimate the potency of the practice of self-compassion. I think it's one of the most powerful practices we could develop, especially where we work in fields that often traditionally take care of other people. So really, we need leaders that can take care of themselves, and that's been hard for a lot of people, I think, me included. So, so we won't do intros. Let me see. Pat, do you want to say a word or two in case folks here haven't seen you? And I'm just going to bring my slides up.
If that's okay. Yeah, so nice to see you, everyone. I'm Pat Bullen. I'm the network coordinator for the East of England, the East Mids and the West Mids Send and Inclusion Network. So I work on behalf of the local authorities, but you couldn't get anything done in Send, could you, or inclusion, if you didn't work in partnership. So it might be deployed by DFE, but it actually is for the co-production aspect of the networks. And I've been involved with the Send Leadership Programme as one of the delivery team for, well, since its inception, which I think was 2015. So today's a little bit of a taster, but also a standalone of what we try to do on that programme, which is we try to look at tools, strategies, approaches, greater effectiveness for better impact and outcomes. But we also think very much about you as a leader and what drives you, what's inside you and what enables you to be resilient. So today's a bit of that focus on being resilient, because whether you're a parent carer leader like Joe, whether you're a DMO like Rachel, whether you're a local area leader like many of you other partners in the group that I've not met before, we need that resilience to be able to keep going. Sometimes it's a marathon as well as a sprint, the work that we do. So we've got some slides to share with you, and I think Jacqui's going to show them.
I am. Okay. Pat, I can see you. Oh no, I can't see you at all now. Can you see my slides?
We can see your slides. Well done.
Okay, I can't see any of you now, so just to let you know, it's not going to be death by PowerPoint either, but we wanted to give you something that can bring together the concepts we're going to talk about so that you've got something for after the session, and we'll make sure that you have them available as part of the day's sharings. So I've said this is the purpose of the session. Now we obviously haven't got a massive time today to name and voice all the struggles. But the reason we've focused on this session being about struggle is because compassion is about struggle. So, in fact, if I go back, just if you're happy to, just shout out what compassion is. How do you define it? What is it made up of? And just shout out.
Kindness.
Kindness. Yeah.
Empathy.
Empathy. Cool, keep going, just shout some. There's no right or wrong here, but let's just think about
Caring.
Caring.
Awareness.
Yeah, we've got to be aware of something's happening, otherwise we wouldn't be able to be compassionate.
Humanity.
Absolutely. Maybe even one of the most important leadership challenges humanity has faced to date. How do we remain kind, caring, empathic in our humanity as we face such difficult things? Anything else?
It's about connection, I think.
Yeah. With whom or what?
With relationships. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, with relationships.
Well, with the object or of our compassion, or
yeah,
with each other, I suppose. If you're in a team, Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's thought-provoking, isn't it? Because it is other, but it is also self, which is kind of where I was gently and clumsily leading you. So yeah, all of those things. And there's a specific definition about compassion, which is about suffering. And I'm just going to introduce you as well to the idea of compassionate leadership as well, because that has a very specific definition and context in academic literature right now. So there's a whole body of work about compassionate leadership, which may be interesting to you. But it literally means to suffer together. It's described as the feeling that arises when you're confronted with someone else's suffering and you feel motivated to relieve it. So there are two elements. There's the awareness that was mentioned just a moment ago. It's a suffering of somebody else, but we are called to help relieve it. That's the definition of compassion. And there's a slightly different definition between compassion and empathy. Basically, empathy, you can empathize with joy or happiness or pride or appreciation or care or love. None of which arguably have suffering in them, although some humans find it difficult to be with positivity and joy. Most humans actually have a limit in terms of how good they'll let things be. But empathy is our feeling of awareness to someone. How is someone else seeing it and what are they feeling, in an attempt to understand how they see things and how they're feeling about it. And the compassion piece is about seeing when that is a suffering experience for them and creating a desire to help. There's at the end of the slides, I've given you a link to Kristen Neff's self-compassion website, because there's a lot of research there and lots of practices. It's a very practical skill, self-compassion. So, but when we're thinking about compassion, so before we talk about compassionate leadership, Pat, do you want to jump in terms of contextualizing this to the world of SEND?
Yeah, if that's okay. Thanks, Jacqui. And I just wanted to say, Jacqui, if you haven't noticed already, is an occupational psychologist by training, whereas I'm from a schools background and then a local authority background. So I think that I sometimes come to this with a bit nuts and bolts. So struggles has been something that I've really needed to get my head around. I think that we talk, as we did in the last session, about the adversarial nature of what we get into in the world that we inhabit in SEND and inclusion. But actually, we all came into it, as Nick Whitaker reminded us, because we want to do something good. And it's that link between the empathy and compassion that I think often drives what, for many of us, is a real belief system, a value system of what we want to do to get those really great lives for young people with additional needs. But there are struggles, and those struggles, as I've asked people around me that I work with across the 3 central regions, are that living with a burning platform. We probably, if you work in a local authority in an EHC needs assessment team, if you're a parent like Joe, and we hear that clamour of needs, requests, and schools telling us that they can't meet need, often before they've even met a child, just because of what they've seen on paper. So it's that sense of living with a burning platform. We're waiting for the SEN review. It's taken 2 years since it began, and things aren't getting easier. So there is that sense of struggle and a bit of that overwhelming overload that some of our colleagues and some of our families feel. There are incredible volumes of work and high demand. We know that there's been a huge increase in children identified as having SEN support and EHC needs, and that workload is increased. Those of you in health, we've never lived through a pandemic. It's the first one in my life. Our families have really been at the brunt of that, our colleagues in health, but everybody else too, because we now got a generation of young people and children who've missed time in nursery and preschool. So they've not developed language skills, the social interaction opportunities. There hasn't been that automatic sort of break because of universal services that families get that enable everyone to bounce back, because resilience is a bit of that bounce back ability, isn't it? So it's been an unusual year, and striving to be a leader and to be strategic, as many of us do. Sometimes that sense of all of these busy plates that we're spinning, and I'm thinking of that as a family as well, Joe, as well as those who work in offices or in teams. striving to be a leader and often feeling like a manager who isn't managing well? Or is it just me? I'm having a look at you and I can see some of you, you look a bit more sanguine and relaxed than me, but temperamentally, it can feel different for each of us. But it probably is feelings on some days like it's difficult to manage. Am I right, Jo?
Yeah, absolutely. I think sometimes you just think, oh, and I think as well, you get into the cycle of things become so bad that it becomes normal, and then you have a period of good, and then it goes back and it hits you like a ton of bricks. Sleep is the worst thing. If you're in that cycle of never sleeping and being up all night with your child, it becomes normality and it becomes, I suppose, quite easy. And then if it does happen out of the blue, oh, it just knocks everything, the whole family, completely sideways. And you
Well,
can't plan it, and that's
no, and it is used as a form of torture, sleep deprivation, and it can feel that way. It can affect your thinking, your decision making, the length of your tether. Yeah. And then I think that people who are in jobs where, you know, we saw in the last session, you know, the things that are keeping you awake at night. Clearly people are waking up at night because they're thinking about waiting times and the ability to meet needs. So it does feel like a challenge, and we've got to live with it. So I think part of today's session is, you know, identifying that struggle that we do have and being able to find some tools that enable us to live with it, to make sure that we manage it as well as we can, which I think Jacqui's next slide is going to, the next slide is about use the chat box to tell us what's your struggle, because I might have just picked up on all the things that are a struggle for Pat Bullen. What about you? Tell us about your struggle or your challenges, and how often are you making time to find your own solutions, to find that compassion for yourself, to try and affect and change what's happening to you. Thanks, Adele. You kicked us off. Maintaining positive relationships across the system. Yeah. An inability to relax and switch off for Jo. Thanks for your honesty. For Hayley, working long hours, but I'm not making sure I take breaks. You probably know you should, but you're not finding the space. For Rachel, in work, it's the complexity of the problems and the fragmentation of the system. For Deborah, trying not to take parental complaints personally. Yeah, they're often about anguish and frustration and not about me, but it feels like it's about me if it comes my way. Just a couple more people that might want to chip in. I think Jessica's about to tell us. And Jane, Jane, being among like-minded people is helpful. And my pandemic mantra has been take one day at a time and be thankful for what I have. I like it. And for Jessica, too much to do and not enough time or work-life balance. So the other part of that, if you're still going to respond, that's great. But the second part was, and I think we've picked up a bit on it with Jane already, how often are you making time to find your own solutions? How often do you, not only that the kind of things that you do, like me and my yoga moves between meetings, but when you get to that point, is there something that you do? Do you ever just take stock? Do you reflect? Thinking about what you said, Jo, when you're a parent, you often get to a point, don't you, where something that's really bothering you, when you talk about it with your partner, if you've got a partner to raise it with, or with a friend, As soon as you identify it, it stops being a problem, it seems, and then a new one comes along. So Hayley's describing something that she did at the start of the pandemic. She did a 100-day grateful challenge. And I think as a team, you have a catch-up meeting and we ask, are you okay?
Twice.
Hayley, you would like you to tell us more, yeah?
So what we were finding at the start of the pandemic, and we've moved it into normal working patterns, is when anybody asks you if you're okay, you go, yeah, I'm fine. But we ask that second question, are you really okay? And it's allowed people to open up and be more honest. And in our management group, I've opened up and said, that's what I need you to do. I need you to ask me twice, because the automatic response will be, yeah, I'm fine. It's just a busy week. Or, yeah, we've got a couple of complex cases. But asking twice really makes people open up, I feel.
That's a good move. And then simple things like Rachel's got a garden, so she's able to take a walk, do some gardening, watch the bees, changes the mindset and the perspective. And for Jessica, she makes time for gym or yoga sessions, particularly in the first lockdown, but you found it a bit more difficult recently. And we've just given Jo a big guilt trip. She should make time, but she doesn't because she feels guilty. And Adele, you're trying to be more self-aware and take breaks. You've rejoined the gym, you're swimming and you're doing your yoga every week. Anyone else? Okay. Jacqui, I think we've got some of the idea of what it's like, and being outside, Jane feels, is really helpful. And on a commute, sometimes just having quiet and no noise, no radio. Yeah, I have a tendency, as I suspect you did before you became more aware and self-aware, Jane, that I just put noise on as an instinct. You know, I just put the radio on wherever I am, or music.
Yeah, can't be with silence. What is in the silence that will be really scary? What is in the nothingness? So as I'm reading your comment, I came back because I couldn't bear just looking at my own slides and not being part of the conversation. It feels like we're at a new layer of self-care. So when we talk about self-care, we talk about things. So there are some basic biological things that we need as humans to survive and to be have nutrition and to be hydrated and to sleep well. They're kind of non-negotiable, which don't throw things at me. I hear how difficult it is for some of you, and there is this other layer of self-care that comes through self-compassion, which we're going to talk about now. But it's new level, because it requires us to recognize we have needs and to ask for what we need, and to allow the people around us to support us and take care of us when we need it. Which is why asking twice, "Are you okay?" it's genius, because the first one will meet the default response for most of us, which is, I'm absolutely fine, even if we're not, because we don't want to burden other people, or because the timing's not right, or because we're just not used to leaning into people that can support us. I might be, you can tell me where I'm wrong, because you might be having a different experience, but I think for so many of us, take a break and walk the dog. Yeah, yep. Totally, Jo. So what do you need to do, Jo? This is for all of us, me included and Pat included, but what do you need to do in order to take responsibility for taking that walk because you need it? I'm going to take a walk right now. And it's practice. It's practice. It gets easier the more we take those, whatever it is that we need. Absolutely. Okay, let me just go on back to here. And okay, so I know there are a lot of words on this slide, so let me just tell you the story of it. If you don't even want to look at the screen, that's okay. This body of research, Compassionate Leadership, two of the main sources I've been looking at that have been really helpful have been the King's Fund and also Roffey Park Institute. And there's also some Harvard Business Review stuff, but there's a link at the last slide. But basically, compassionate leadership, and there's a lot of research in the NHS right now. there's a real benefit of having leaders who understand what compassion is and are compassionate leaders. There are benefits to our health and nervous systems, and to having a workforce that believe that they work in a caring, nurturing environment, that they will be supported. So we've already talked about it's the caring, but plus the motivation to act. When I hear someone, I don't know if was it you, Joe, that said that you hadn't slept or you'd been up all night with a child. Was that Joe that said that? Was it someone else? Identify yourself with it.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it was me. I just realised you couldn't see me waving.
Okay. Yeah, no, I can't see. Thank you. So what I noticed in me was a tenderness towards, like, first of all, my brain has to go, what would that be like not sleeping consistently over a period of time? And then how can I help? And I might not be out. There are different versions of helping, of course, because sometimes, as you will all well know, sometimes helping can look like rescuing or can be disempowering to the person we're trying to, in inverted commas, help. But the motivation to act that is elicited in me as I see someone else's discomfort is what compassion is. Obviously, I'd want to check out, before I launch in to help Jo with her lack of sleep, I'd want to check out with her, like, what kind of help would you need, and would you like some help in the first place? But the fact is that it elicits the desire to help in me, whether or not I do anything about it. Some of the barriers we've got going on to compassion in organisations are that people are afraid that this tenderness in this way of being is a weakness. I think less so in the world we work within than in I say that. I've done a lot of work in Honda. And there's a lot of compassion in the workforce. You know, the guys that sell the cars are compassionate, emotionally intelligent human beings, because they've got to understand people, otherwise they wouldn't sell cars. But there's this fear of tenderness and softness and gentleness in us, I think sometimes, and also cultural pressure. I don't know if you've ever heard, you know, anyone anywhere saying push on through, or, you know, we haven't got time for that fluffy stuff, you know, the fluffy bunny social work rubbish stuff. It's something that I've heard someone say in adult social care, that they get told, you know, don't come at me with the fluffy bunny stuff. But it's actually critical to powerful leadership right now for us to be who we are, and also to be appreciative and allowing of other people where they are, including with their difficulties. So in some ways we need to lead from the front in terms of developing compassion, or not just developing it, but yeah, I think it is practice. We're probably naturally compassionate. Those of us that are here in this room, I would say, are probably naturally compassionate. But whether we're actually seeing that as a gift and a skill and a leadership capacity that we bring. This idea about being alive to other suffering, non-judgmental as far as possible, or at least being aware of any judgments we have. Tolerate personal distress. So I think this is a biggie, because I don't know about you, but I've had to learn to be with other people's discomfort and not have all my own stuff triggered. If there's deep sadness or rage at unfairness, or tears, or an outburst of emotion, I've had to learn how to be with that without getting enmeshed in it myself, or in having a reaction. So there's something about being able to stay and hold space for people as they're in difficulty, which you will already be masters at, because of the work you'll have done with children and young people and families. But it's worth being curious about as we take audit of our own compassion. An empathic response and taking appropriate action just links to the definition of compassion. So here's the thing, it starts with self-compassion, and that's both nurturing and fierce. So self-compassion that's nurturing looks like having a bath, taking the dog, you know, going for a dog walk, doing a yoga pose in between sessions, taking good care of ourselves and being soft and gentle with ourselves, especially when things are difficult. And it looks like fierce, which means healthy boundary setting, saying no with some force if it is required, like having the ability to call on the energy and power to set a boundary with some fierceness. Think mama bear protecting her cubs. So this is a relatively new element of self-compassion. And I don't know about you, but I had, like, the nurturing bit was one thing to learn, but standing up for myself and using my power for the fierce self-compassion part has been a bit of a journey for me. So if it is for you as well, you're not alone. And then this idea at the bottom about that starts with autonomy and control. This is from a King's Fund paper about NHS leadership, which I've got a link to, so you'll be able to see it if you want. But the essence of this is when we're leading through pandemics with compassion, we need to make sure that the people that are around us have control and have a voice in the decisions that are made. I know you know this because it applies with families, but it also applies with the people we are leading or co-working with, or even if we are being led and not being given an opportunity to have choice and control and our voice is heard. That's going to feel like it adds more pressure. And belonging is a piece about if we believe that we belong to a caring, nurturing organization, there's so many benefits in terms of how we feel and our well-being, but also people's tendency to have commitment to that organization, all sorts of psychological variables that can be measured about how people feel when they feel like they're cared about and cared for. And if you're looking around where you work right now and it's feeling less than that, don't panic, because sometimes the awareness of this can be the starting point. And if you want a conversation, if it triggers anything for you that you want to have a conversation about, you can speak to Pat or I later, and we'll make sure we signpost you to some good resources. And then there's this piece about competence. So compassionate leadership has this piece in it which allows people to say, here's how we're doing, and this is what's difficult, in the context of moving forward. It's not about getting stuck in that place, but it is giving regular time, even if it's 2 minutes at a meeting, a bit like asking someone twice, how are they doing? Having regular review and space and time for recovery when things have been difficult is really needed for people to be able to honour where they've been. Is there anything anybody wants to say about those things?
We've said a little bit in the chat box, Jackie, that when you started to talk about tenderness, it did make a few of us think inevitably about Gareth Southgate. And I know, you know, he's become a bit of a poster boy for inclusion recently, but he really did display tenderness for what I could describe as his workforce, but the young players that he did, you know, he had some personal experience of missing a penalty, but it's been so much more than that, really, that he's been alive to others' suffering. He hasn't been the victim of racism, but he's understood what impact that's had on some of his young players' lives and their families' lives. And he's stood up and supported them in a really compassionate way. So yeah. I think a few of us were just reflecting a little bit on that in the box.
Yeah, brilliant example. And so his empathy could be, I know how this person's seeing this. I know that someone's being hard on themselves because they missed the penalty. And the feeling behind that is anger, fear, disappointment, loss, whatever. His compassion is seeing that suffering. He's moved to help, either with a hug or by using his voice, especially being a white voice in the world of, you know, if you think about anti-racism, a white voice is a powerful voice when standing for someone else's right to belong just as they are. And like when the goal was scored, he can empathize, but there would be no compassion there because there's no need for compassion when a goal is scored, maybe for the other side, because there's no suffering. So that's the difference between empathy and, yeah, absolutely. He's showing wonderful leadership, and it's so I think football is really serving us well right now by bringing us lots of things to think about where we stand and how we experience things. Okay, so I want to share with you about what self-compassion is. This is Kristen Neff's definition, and there are 3 elements to self-compassion. So I'll tell you very briefly about this slide that's on your screen, and then we'll practice it. So self-compassion is self-kindness, which is in this moment of suffering. So you don't do self-compassion when things are going well. You don't need it because things are going well. It's in the moment that we're having a hard time or being really, really hard on ourselves. So either something is happening or in our heads, we're being hard on ourselves. And if you don't think you've got a voice in your head, that little voice that told you that is the voice in the head, just so you know. If you're hard on yourself, the voice of self-compassion, the kindness part is the one that treats yourself with grace and dignity and gentleness when you're having a hard time. And then there's a piece about common humanity, which means you are not the only one to experience this. As a human being, there will be thousands and thousands of other human beings experiencing something similar to you are right at this moment. So you're not alone. It's the piece about common humanity. And there's a mindfulness piece, which just means not getting stuck in the suffering, being able to feel it and process it and move through it. So how that looks, in fact, I'm going to come out because that's like a big slide and you'll have to just follow it along. Hello, we've got 7 minutes left. Okay. May I be kind to myself as I notice we've got 7 minutes left. Okay. How it looks is let's say I'm having a hard time. Let's say I've just realized there's 7 minutes left and then I think, oh, I'm such an idiot for letting it get to this point. I wouldn't think that these days, and I'm not having that experience. But if I were, I can either go off on that trail of thought or I can stop and go, ouch. So what I do is I put my hands on me because I can feel my warmth. If you want to do it with us, you can. You don't have to. You do have to at some point though, because practice this skill. If you don't ever change anything, develop more kindness towards yourself, because we can't really be compassionate to others unless we are including ourselves. It's kind of a 360 thing. So I put my hands on myself because I can feel how human and tender and infallible and imperfect I am. You feel the life of me in this present moment. But the thing for me to say is, this is a moment of suffering. Ouch. This hurts. Ouch. May I be kind to myself in this moment? That's the first piece of self-compassion. The second piece is the common humanity piece, which is other people would feel like this too. Any other facilitator that had 5 minutes to go and noticed that they were giving themselves a hard time about it, which I'm not, but let's say I was, would feel like this. Some version of this. It's not just me. It's normal to feel like this. What do I need? So the mindfulness question for me is, what do I need? Do I need a moment? Do I need a yoga pose? Do I need to ask for help? Hardest thing for us, right? Hardest thing to ask for help. What do I need? Ouch, this is a moment of suffering. Others would feel something similar. What is it that I need? Whilst and you can also, there's a butterfly hug. If you did this, you're actually able to activate, I think it's theta waves that live, there's something called havening touch, which is a therapy that begins like this because it starts to create theta waves in the brain that are slower and more receptive. But if you're in a meeting, you could literally sit like this. You don't have to show anyone that you're tapping yourself, but there's something about the awareness and connection with yourself in that moment with kindness that is self-compassion. So, but it's when it's hard. And often we have the hard thing, and then 10 minutes later we reflect on it and go, oh, I forgot to be kind to myself. I beat myself up all the way through that. Like I was hard on myself. I was telling myself anything shoulds are always unkind. It doesn't mean we wouldn't hold ourselves accountable for something we wanted to do differently. But I don't think, someone said to me last week, surely you can shame people into different action. And I don't think we respond well when we are made wrong or shamed. This is the opposite of that. This is deep tenderness to ourselves, allowing ourselves to be normal and human. So the practice of self-compassion. So to be a compassionate leader and have all the benefits of that compassion, and to be able to see and recognize struggling in others and then be motivated to help, I think it starts with us practicing being with ourselves in difficulty with kindness. We are the ones who give ourselves the kindness. Taking a breath. I just think it's a magical, and like gratitude, it creates a chemical hormone. It kicks off a whole lot of chemical reactions in our bodies that are nourishing and nurturing and the antidote to the stress chemicals. So you're doing a very practical, real healing just by being willing to be with ourselves in struggle with kindness. I'm not going to cry today, but sometimes when I'm talking about this, I can feel like the tenderness of it because I think it's really important and I want it for you. I would love for you to have this practiced skill in your toolkit if you don't already. Okay, so, and also just have a look around the screen at the faces you can see and let your eyes land on someone who looks friendly. and
We
give them a
can't see you,
smile.
Jacqui, I don't think.
Pardon?
I can't see you, Jacqui, at the moment.
Oh, I wonder why.
No, I don't think others can.
Oh, it's
Hi,
Jane
Jacqui.
here. I can see you, Jacqui.
I'll turn my camera off and then on again. Am I back?
Yay,
Yeah.
thanks. So it looks friendly,
Right.
but we're looking at a friendly face. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. Were you looking for my friendly face? So here's something, this isn't necessarily about compassion, but thinking about connection with other humans. If you've got to create connection and trust and safety in virtual meetings, if you give people permission, like they don't have to do it, but if you get people to look around the screen and look at someone else and then smile, the whole screen lights up with people smiling and people feel like they've made a connection, so it feels safer. It depends on the context of the meeting, of course. If you're there to give bad news, people might not be receptive to that, but we're sort of just doing the same, but with ourselves. So mirror work would be lesson 2, looking in the mirror. I remember having like homework for months where I had to look in the mirror and say, I love you, I really love you. And I'm kind of being skitty about it as I tell you, because it touches a place in me where I go, oh, that's ridiculous. Like, who do I think I am loving myself? That's ridiculous. But this is the work we're doing, being willing to accept ourselves for who we are, even as we struggle. Not making ourselves wrong. In the slides that we're going to share with you, there is another activity about you. Well, I'll let you see it. So if you want more, you can do that activity. We always put too much content into a small window of time. So because we've got a minute to go, we want to honour your time and just give you the opportunity to say anything you want to say in the last minute. Or ask any questions, and if you want to connect with Pat or I later, you can. So the conversation's not going to be over. But is there anything anybody wants to say or share or ask before we close?
Go on, Rachel.
Yeah, I was going to say that what I've noticed is that that the importance of being compassionate to yourself is how you are then able to be less critical and kinder and to others. And it's that what you really seek, isn't it? That you in a leadership or group situation, you're able to be kind, and unless you're kind to yourself, it is really difficult. Yeah.
I think it's impossible, actually. You know, if I meet people now that are hypercritical with other people, I know they're not kind to themselves.
Yeah, beating themselves. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think it's not our fault either, Rachel, because we've been conditioned, haven't we? The education system, our family systems, well-meaning people have brought us up to, whip crack, on you go and keep going and don't make a fuss. And actually, but I think this is critical to our survival right now. I really do. As humans, I think our ability to look after each other starts with our ability to let ourselves belong as well. It doesn't mean we don't hold ourselves to account or know how to do a good apology or put things right if we've got stuff wrong. But it's about our very being. Like, can I be kind to what it is to be a human being? And so yeah, it gives me goosebumps to think about people being leaders who are willing to be kind to others, especially when things are difficult and people are fractious and fraught. It takes great courage, I think. Thanks, Rachel. Go for it, Adele.
Yeah, it's just brought to mind something I did a few weeks ago when I think I was feeling really just finding things quite difficult, and relationships are really important to me, and it was just about just how I was feeling about some people kind of in my workspace. And I've sent myself a kind of a reminder that comes up on my phone calendar every day, and I just needed it from that. And it just says, love and kindness brings peace and contentment. And that was obviously what I needed right then, but it comes up every day. And I find it's good for me because it helps me to remember to be not just self-compassionate, but just compassionate to others, even when there's conflict or it feels like we're not connecting or whatever, injustice, whatever it is, but just trying to put some compassion. It doesn't always work, but it kind of reminds me. Yes.
Yeah, love that. And remember, there's a piece of compassion, which is fierce self-compassion. So sometimes we need to put boundaries in place with other people. It doesn't make us uncompassionate. It makes us compassionate to ourselves, where we're in toxic situations or with toxic people, or just the energy is too much or whatever. I like that addition, because it's not about all love and light and we'll let anything happen and we're just allowing. It's not that. It's a very specific skill set. I can see you're struggling and I want to help. But there's another lot of skill sets around. I can be kind. And Brene Brown talks about, sorry to bring her in right at the end, clear is kind. So sometimes being clear with other people is the kindest thing to do. I think we've been conditioned to think kindness is all allowing, and my kindness was, I let anything happen. You can do whatever you want to me because I won't make a fuss. And I've learned that's not actually kind. That's conditioning for, well, we won't talk about what it's conditioning for, but it's an unhooking that's a lot of us are having to do, I think. So
thinking of being fierce as well, I think you do need probably a little 5-minute turnaround break between this one and the next workshop that you might be going to. The slides are really useful because there is a little exercise that I think is invaluable, and Jacqui's put lots of links to research and other considerations, because it is a bit about deciding that you'll give yourself a little bit of time. You've got all the time for the kids, the time for the job, the time for the dog, the time to clean the house. What about just a few minutes for you, even if it is once a week? So thank you, Jacqui. I think that's been a really insightful look at self-compassion, and hopefully it will lead you to do a bit more of the doing of that for yourself, everybody. Yeah, I think we're going to send the slides out, aren't we, Fiona?
We are. Is that one, Rachel?
Yeah, the slides can come out, so that's fine.
Okay. Good. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Fiona.
Thanks, everyone.
It's good to all see you all, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
Yeah, take care.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Jacqui, should we jump straight into the other one?
Yeah, I'm just going to get a quick cup of tea because I didn't have one before this one.
Oh, you grab a cup of tea then.
Well done, guys. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. I didn't know what I was expecting, so thank you very much.
So actually, I'll have a cup of tea after that. I'll come straight there.
Should we go? Are you going to let us into the next one, Fiona, or do we just start off?
So someone else will be in your next session, but you can just click the link and it should start. But they should be also starting it very soon.
Okay, thanks. Well done, Jacqui. See you in a minute.
Nice to meet you both.
Bye.
Bye.